If you're a tennis player who suffers from a chronic stress-related injury, whether that's tennis elbow or tendonitis of the shoulder or wrist, this is the video to watch. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can prevent, reduce, and in some cases, completely resolve many of these chronic stress-related tennis injuries. Let's jump in. Now, chronic stress-related injuries are just that. They're injuries that happen due to an overuse of muscle groups or tendon groups that really shouldn't be used quite so much. Now, no two injuries are the same, but if you suffer from a chronic stress-related injury, chances are you're doing a combination of any of these three things. You're either holding the racket too tight, you're routinely making contact in a non-ergonomic part of your body, or you're overusing your smaller muscle groups to force the racket through its motion. So let's start with that first issue of squeezing the racket too tight. There's a natural tension from the uncertainty of not knowing where your opponent's going to hit the ball. And that tension can get manifested in squeezing the racket too tight. And this is a problem. In the short term, this chronic tight squeezing of the racket's going to tire me out much faster than I would if I was relaxed. And in the long term, that kind of tight squeezing is going to eventually fatigue and ultimately injure the muscles. The secret to detensing at this stage is simply to become aware of it. Look down at your hand and just let go. Let go of the racket, maybe flip the racket up to yourself like this. Just kind of feel the racket's weight bobbing in gravity. And in between points, as you get ready to play against your opponent, just notice the tension if there's any there and just loosen it up, spin the racket once or twice, dance a little bit. Just try your best to hold on to the racket a little bit looser than you might normally be holding on to it. All you really need to do is develop an awareness of the tension for you to naturally begin to release and start letting go. At first, you're going to need to remind yourself of this on a regular basis, and then over time, less and less. The next big source of wrist and elbow and shoulder problems has to do with the contact point. As a general rule, you want your position of contact to be in an ergonomic spot. If you make contact with the ball behind, you're going to feel quite a bit of stress on your elbow. Whereas if you make contact with the ball a little bit further in front, you're going to feel supported from your arm all the way through your shoulder. Your whole body is going to feel behind the shot, and you can feel that natural strength. One of the ways that you can find a better ergonomic position for your ground stroke is to go in front of a wall or in front of the net. In my case, I'm going to use this basket and just feel where the contact point needs to be to feel at its strongest. As you can see here, I'm a little bit late to contact and I'm going to feel quite a bit of stress right in my elbow area, right at the source of where tennis elbow tends to be. So hitting the ball chronically late is a surefire way to give myself tennis elbow. Now if I back up to about here, I can feel strength and support from the entire arm all the way through my body, which means that when I make contact with the ball here out in front, I'm going to naturally have a much higher source of leverage as I drive through the shot. This also applies to the serve. If I make contact with the ball excessively behind me on the serve, it's going to put a lot of stress on my shoulder, and that's going to cause tendonitis of the shoulder. If I can replace my serve so that my contact is more in an ergonomic position, I'm going to resolve many of these shoulder issues. So let's say you're no longer holding the racket too tight and you found a natural, ergonomic, high leverage position to make contact with your shots. There's one more thing you must do to fully resolve these issues. You have to learn to use less of your muscular effort when swinging the racket. By over-relying on muscular effort to swing the racket, not only am I missing out on the natural free power I would get from dropping the racket into gravity, it's going to unduly put stress on these weaker muscle and joint groups and increase the chance of injury. So the conventional wisdom for addressing things like tennis elbow or tendonitis is to get a lighter racket than the one you're using. Now this might temporarily relieve some of the issues to an extent, because by removing some of the mass of the racket, you also remove some of the natural inertia that you'd be fighting against when you're using too much muscle-bound effort. But you will never completely resolve these issues. In fact, since you're using a more maneuverable, lighter racket, you might even find yourself exaggerating many of the same muscular tension issues that created the problems in the first place. A far more effective and long-term solution to these issues is to learn how to use less of your own muscular effort and more of the natural momentum that you get from using gravity as part of your stroke. This involves learning to sense and then release the tenseness of the grip that you have on the racket. It involves finding the natural, ergonomic, high leverage contact points for any stroke that you wish to hit. And it also involves learning to use the natural momentum you get from dropping the racket into gravity, as opposed to using too much muscle-bound effort to try to force the racket to go where you want to go. So the good news is that by learning the techniques of dynamic tennis method, you will naturally increase your efficiency and reduce unnecessary muscle tension, which will result in less injuries. And if you already have some chronic injuries, there's a very good chance that you will reduce and in some cases even completely resolve them. I have one student who on the second or third lesson that we ever had together had one of those gel bands that he wore on his elbow. That gel band actually fell off in the middle of a stroke because his racket had become so loose in his hand that the muscles that were normally bulging had gotten smaller to the point that that pad actually fell off of his arm. It slid down his arm and went off his wrist. Now, I found this incredible, but this isn't the only time that I've had this kind of result happen with my students. I guarantee you, if you remove that excess muscle tension and you start to use more of the natural momentum of your racket, all of these issues are going to get better.